we're back.
She's from Arya Samaj.
If they keep this up for very much longer, people are gonna freak out.
What kind of parties?
Come together in their little hot box.
What do you think of Jen?
Everything she does and says is that she's just too smart for everyone.
How would we get done with your bullshit?
The principles are on the edges. You're either a tolerant Greek or a moralizing Jew.
He'll regret trolling me like that. This level of shitty fucking behavior.
So that's why we're all here, and that's probably why I haven't listened to the news in 2 days.
Global homo dictatorship, brother Fly.
So she didn't prove reincarnation. If it's faith, that's not proof.
I need people's minds on certain problems where I might lack knowledge.
Are you gonna stop? Because as far as I'm concerned, I could skewer you right now and you have zero recourse. This is all happening on my turf, but you owe me.
You're
I'm
engaged
saying
in apologetic.
that the hormones change.
Seriously.
That when
You need to.
reach the
You're off.
pinnacle
You're off.
The exoteric dictator cannot make mistakes. Ruling people is not about being better than them. It's about service.
You don't get to tell me how to act.
There's probably a nice person who lives across the street.
You're obsessed with Jen and it's all creepy, and you have the audacity called me a weirdo.
It's all so surreal.
This is just awful.
Alright, so you aired that part out, dude.
Hello and welcome back to Church of Entropy live streams. I am joined here today by a friend of the show, SupraLibrix, for another conversation about his exciting new approach to understanding this infinitely mysterious world that we live in. Without further ado, hand the floor over to him for introductions. Welcome to the show. How are you doing today, and where would you like to take our conversation on this fine Tuesday evening?
Well, I think what I want to do is I want to show the new tool that I made. I've been thinking about this and trying to figure out the best way to do it, but I want to introduce a couple new terms, and that's the Q slope. And it's not a coincidental name. The Q stands for quality. So what is quality? And that's a philosophical term. Not everyone uses the word quality, but what do you mean by that? And it's whatever you like. Now, did you ever read Zen and the Art of Motorcycle Maintenance? Do you know that book?
I'm familiar with it. I haven't read it, but I'm somewhat familiar with the teachings of Zen. And I wanted to let the audience know that I just found out today that SupraLibrix is actually a meme maker. He's got a couple of fresh ones out there, and they're pretty good, I gotta say. Not everyone can do that. Nice job.
I appreciate that. A meme is the most concentrated information per pixel you can get. I think that's because it compacts so much of preconceived thought and ideas inside, and knowing your audience and knowing their preconceptions, all you need to do is add a couple pixels and the whole idea is changed or altered or enhanced. So you have what I have is a tool to analyze every single thing you look at. Every single thing can be analyzed through the Q logic. And I like that term. So you have because it deals with how you feel. So the basics of it is, let me send you a link to what I'm looking at, so you can go alongside here.
You can screen share it if you want, or I can screen share. You can screen share your screen, or I can screen share it if you want to send me a link. It's up to you.
How do I screen share from Hangouts here? Is that on a? Sorry,
you just have to click the 3 dots at the top right of the Hangouts window and say
share screen. Okay, yep, got it.
And you pick the screen of the application you want to share. So you have to go to application window and just click on whichever one of your applications has what you'd like to show.
I get it. So it's sharing, and you should see Game AIX. Do you see the Game AIX there?
Yep.
Okay, good. So that's where we're at. So basically, once you have this tool, it doesn't matter what anyone's talking about, you can map it on this tool. So it gives you a, whenever I hear these terms, so I was just talking to Jennifer, telling her I purposefully had nothing to do with the internet, other as a tool. I use it all the time for research, and watching stuff. But as far as any kind of social interaction, never touched it. I had a couple of forums back in the .com days that I used very rarely because it seemed like it was easier to just look it up someplace else than to ask someone and then have them give you an answer that you had to look up anyway.
Isn't that such the tragedy of being a big brain, where you're just like, well, I could ask someone for this, but then I don't have any quality control. I'll forget it. I'll just figure it out myself.
That's about it. So, but that's a good lesson. Just for a little bit of history there, I worked at a .com startup back in the mid 90s, and I was selling used cars at the time. I just got back from South America, took a motorcycle trip across the country, and then ended up in Southern California and found a beautiful, awesome girl, and still didn't know what I wanted to do with myself. I was selling used cars, and I sold one to a guy who had just started a .com startup. It was an ISP at the time, and they did a little bit of credit card processing. And I said, I want to work for you. I want to be your apprentice. I'll work for free. So I did. That's how I got into the business, and I had a knack for it. My dad was an electrical engineer. I had a computer since 1977, so I was somewhat adept, but had never dealt with them on a professional basis. But anyway, so he hired me on with knowing I didn't know much of anything, but so I had a knack for it and just threw everything at me. So it was an interesting dynamic. It was basically, here, we need to do this, figure it out, and if it breaks, fix it or you're fired. So that was that was sort of the dynamic the whole time, which was fine for me because it was very interesting. I learned everything from punching down cables up to got into the not the backbone routers, but the second tier down. Basically, everything from the last mile down is what I dealt with. So it gave me a good understanding of the whole network topology and how to deal with just about every level. But anyway, but I never had anything to do with the social media scene at all. By design, it's not interesting to me. It wasn't interesting to me. Now it's intensely interesting. But so when I come on, when I have this little theory I worked out, what's interesting is I meet people who've been looking at this kind of thing for years, and I come with great humility. I know I have a crazy show, and I like to be a little ostentatious and silly, but that's by design, because you have to find the people that can defend their position. If you go in and say, I have an idea, well, nobody cares about your idea. But if your idea is better, you have to find someone that can beat yours. If they can't beat your idea, well, then what does that mean? You've got the best one. So the past couple of years, I've been battling online in a nice way, trying to figure out how people thought. And I came up with this system, and it just explains every single thing. And you can map out thought processes in color, the way their minds work, the way they think, and the way to change people's minds. And you see how people are twisted around by definitions of words. People will say things and that they'll have one connotation, and the other person will disagree completely using the same words. So what does that mean? Your language is insufficient to convey thought at that point. You can't even argue because you don't share definitions. So at that point, all that's left is what's outside the set of language. You got a couple things. You got math, you've got colors, you've got violence, you got voting. You got a couple physical actions are outside the set of language. So if you can't agree on anything, well, fight about it. And you fight at the ballot box, or you fight at what channel you pick to watch on TV. Everything, you just decide what to do. So what this does, it allows you to map thought processes before they get to the physical blows. And what I found most interesting was online, people would say things that were fighting words. Why are you so disrespectful to this person? Me, I'm an easygoing guy. I don't have a lot to argue about with people. It's not I don't have that nature. So when I jumped on the social media scene, I realized that people were literally trying to destroy the other person's reputation online, and they don't even know what they're talking about themselves. You see that all day, every day. So what do you do with that?
When people undertake a massive defamation campaign against you on the internet, that's their way of saying, "Hi, how's it going? I kind of like your ideas."
Well, maybe
it's always down to interpretations, right? I think it's important to keep a positive attitude in spite of certain people maybe not having the greatest social skills on the internet.
Right. Well, yeah, you got that too, right? So you just have normal people that don't know how to interact, and they see everyone else acting this way. So I guess I'll join the party. And for me, that was confusing because that's just not my nature anyway, to be combative. On the other hand, I like to be right of course, everyone likes to be right. Why would you want to be wrong about anything, right? But I'm fairly self-confident in most of my opinions, and usually because they're based on physical facts, things that are true because certain elements act certain ways. That's most of what I believe true is because I understand that at a high enough level that you just know oil and water don't mix. Little things like that, it's not an opinion, it's because of the properties of the elements involved. And that's a fractal knowledge you have at that point. If you understand this concept, well, that applies to everything all through life. So that's sort of my goal with this is if kids knew certain fundamental truths, well, and then understood that this applies in everything throughout your whole life. If you knew that, you wouldn't do half the things you do. You would see the chain of events that led up to something you didn't expect.
Yeah, and there's a concept called manifest destiny, where it's basically like you create, like the short way of putting it is that you create your own reality, and that probably sounds too esoteric for most people, but most people don't understand the degree to which their own mental state influences their experience.
Yes, and that's a tragedy because, not only that thought itself has been leveraged to manipulate people. So if you think you can't do anything, well, that right there that idea is a weapon. Or I should say it's an idea that can be used as a weapon. So part of my whole theory is ideas act just like physical objects as far as how they change the way you think about something. If you, what's the difference if you're scared of the boogeyman? What's the difference between that and actually seeing a wolf at the edge of the woods? Same thing. You're not going to go in because you're scared. So the ideas work just as well as physical objects to inhibit or prod, or what's the opposite of inhibit? Encourage.
So you could say encourage or incentivize.
Yeah. So your incentive or inhibition can be completely imaginary and have exactly the same effect on your actions.
Oh, I think in that context, it would be impulse versus inhibition.
Yeah, but I mean, even if you think about it, well, just that example, the boogeyman. Why does the boogeyman story exist if no one's ever seen a boogeyman? Well, it exists because they didn't want their kids running in the woods or doing something dangerous, so they make up a story to lodge it in their mind, so they know, look, this is dangerous, and just don't do that. So it removes the authority lies in the imagination there, and the parents don't have to worry about that anymore. If the kid's scared enough of the boogeyman, well, you won't have to worry about him running into the woods at nighttime and getting eaten by the wolves because he thinks there's a boogeyman. And really,
are you getting at the idea that like ideas, even if they don't have any material correspondence, still manifest material effects?
Exactly. In your
Yeah,
behavior.
I think that's a really important concept, because people will get into this like loop where they're like, well, that's not true. And it's like,
Yeah, exactly.
it's not that it does matter whether it's true, but just because something isn't true doesn't mean that it isn't, I don't know what the right word is, true-ish, because it has effects, right? Like,
Yeah, well, that's the IX. That's it. It has an effect. Now, you can say it's false, but it still has an effect, whether you think it's true or not. And if someone else thinks it's true and disagrees with you, there's nothing you can do to convince them otherwise. Nothing other than changing their physical environment or demonstrating another way that makes more sense, that they value. So yeah, that's exactly it. And see, this is where I've been interested in these things, but never gone down rabbit holes. So once I started having my little theory, you can go through any ideology and just pick things off that make sense or don't, and their effects on people. So philosophy is dead. That's one of the things I want that to be known. Not that philosophy
is dead, and science and misunderstanding religion killed it.
Yeah. I think
that's for a while. Like, I agree with you. Like, when was the last time that somebody came up with a good idea in philosophy that actually got people excited and interested to talk about it?
Right. Yeah. It's just, well, I saw a meme. I wish I could bring it up right now, but it was philosophers discussing philosophy. They're sitting around a table all calm and sipping tea. And then the next slide is philosophers arguing about what philosophy is best, and they're all rolling on the ground fighting, So philosophy per se, it has no use. The design, the intent is, and this is where you get into you map out philosophy in the tool, and they all come down to the same thing: is how should you spend your time and energy? That's all there is, right? Time and energy, and everything else is in your head, in your consciousness. And you can come up with all sorts of explanations. That's why I don't want to talk about religion. I don't want to argue anyone's religion, because that's talking about things that you can't prove one way or the other. So why are you arguing about it? Argue about something else. Argue about the best way to do things, not the reasons behind things that you can't prove. So I bypass all sorts of these, every argument, not every, I bypass all sorts of things that people love to talk about, because it's just that. It's arguing about a philosophy that you can't prove. It's just a preference, your opinion. And as long as your opinion's synergistic or aligns with mine, we're fine. If your opinion impinges on my physical lifestyle, well, that's something to talk about. But if it doesn't bother you or it doesn't have any effect on your life, then it doesn't matter. And of course, that comes into politics, because politics is kinetic philosophy, I guess. It's the exercise of a philosophy over others. And that's where the whole world is right now, is you have this division of philosophies, and everybody's trying to say their philosophy is best. Well, philosophy is dead. Why are we even talking about politics or philosophy? Everyone knows what's right, pretty much, except you've got dangerous psychopathic people that now I want to talk about psychopath. That's an interesting word, but it doesn't matter what your philosophy is. It matters how it affects others. So if you're alone in the woods, your philosophy, it doesn't affect other people. It doesn't matter what your philosophy is. But what if your philosophy involves something that controls other people? Should you vote? Well, everyone votes. So people are voting on control over other people. And where are they getting their ideas? Why are they voting for this person or that person? Because their philosophy lines up. So if you look at it, everything's philosophy and politics. And I say philosophy, but religion's right in there too. What I mean by that is just ideology, I guess, is the entire word of it. Includes both philosophy and religion. So there's no need to talk about that anymore. It's like the horse driving the sun across the sky. If you know the time schedule, well, that's fine. Believe that. And just make sure you harvest the crops on time. Put up some rocks to make sure the horse driver is on time. The Stonehenge. I You probably know a lot more about that than I do. I just remember as a kid marveling at it, just the fact that I was this 8-year-old kid and these rocks weighed more than the car. How did they do that? Well, they just had other rocks to move stuff around and sticks. How did they do that? I was always amazed as a kid of the old technologies that lower tech civilizations used and erected these just beautiful, massive monuments in stone and wood, and the degree of the amount of effort compared to the technology was just amazing to me. And they're still there. So anyway, so let's stop talking about politics. Let's stop talking about philosophy. Of course you can, because that affects you personally. The politics that someone else has now affects you personally. Well, it always has, but now it's seen as this moral division of what's right and what's wrong. And you see people who, well, a few years ago, hey, that was a good person. And now all of a sudden, no, that person's stupid. That person's evil. That person, there's been a moral division in a shared language. I'm talking about America, but I think it's evident globally too. It's the same principle. And now with the internet, everyone can communicate. It doesn't matter what your language is. There's a translator. You can pretty much transfer most ideas basically losslessly anywhere in the world instantly. And that's a new thing. That's never happened in history before. So we've got a couple new tools of technology that never existed, and we're still using old ideologies to manage that. So it's untenable. There's no way you can control what we have using tools that were using ideas that were written down on a piece of paper with a piece of bird and ink, right? That the basic ideas are good, but you get down to the fundamentals and the day-to-day stuff, it's just not adequate. We were talking about colleges. That used to be a great idea. How are you going to transfer information from one brain to another the most efficient way? How would you do that? If you got horses and scrolls and books, and that's all you got to convey information, well, you got to build a building, keep the books dry, then you got to have the kids come there so they can see the books, and then you got to have them practice it. So that made sense at that time. But right now, if you need information, the most expensive, when I say expensive, let's change terms a little bit. And when I say expensive, I mean that includes time, energy, money. It's expensive is an encompassing term, meaning it's more expensive to go to college to get information than it is to look at your phone and say, what's the capital of North Dakota? You got it. You don't have to go anywhere. And that's almost every discipline now can be learned from anywhere and sent anywhere, except for the practical, physical things. But all the theoretical and intellectual things can be communicated instantly anywhere in the world. So having a college, you put up a $50 million camp or building, let alone a campus. I don't know how much campuses cost. That's a ludicrous waste of resources.
One for sale in Vermont, and I think it was originally listed like somewhere between 10 and 20 million, and now I think it's down to accepting orders in the 2 million range.
What was it? What was the object?
It's a college in Vermont is on the real estate market because I guess they unfortunately couldn't pay their bills.
Yeah, well, how are you gonna convince kids to go to, you need to go to this geographic location to learn something you can learn in your bedroom, right? Give me some incentive. And you're gonna charge me money too? A lot of money. I'm gonna have debt for 30 years so that I can go someplace I don't wanna go? Well, they wanna go, it's fun too, but.
Oh yeah, and did you hear that there's gonna be e-learning for some colleges? Like they're not even gonna open the classes back up?
Well,
that's going to accelerate the collapse of the education bubble because already it's pretty tenuous. I think we were sort of talking about that earlier, but if they start doing that, I mean, people are going. Don't you see that as sort of like the beginning of the end for that type of model where you're sinking what, like 30,000, 40,000 in to get an education with no
Well,
guarantee?
Yeah, let me tell you what I in my when I say things, it's through the theory. So I'm going to stop referring to it or anything. I'm just going to say it as if it were fact, and I think you won't be able to disagree with anything I say. I think I've got it down in my head enough that it makes sense. But people don't change their mind unless it benefits them, or they feel stupid not changing. Or you now stupid means that's a rough term, but what I mean is it wouldn't benefit them to keep that opinion. It's either smarter to change your mind or it wouldn't benefit you. So you take anything by that razor and go to, okay, college. You get this kid, I want to go to college. Well, why do you want to go to college? Well, I want to get a job and I need to learn this, and this is where they teach you. Okay, you know, if you spent 3 months, you would know everything in that college course. You know that, right? Okay. And you know it would be free, and they even post all their classes online. So what you're really doing, you're going someplace for 9 months out of the year, and you're paying somebody $50,000 to say that you learned it, and they can't even guarantee that you learned it. Okay, so that's what you're doing. So the kid's got to evaluate that and say, oh, wait a minute. So I got to take most of a year, then I'm going to have this tremendous debt for something I can learn by myself, and all I get is a piece of paper at the end. Is that right? So why would you do that? If it doesn't make sense, the market is going to be in decline, whether you think so or not. Why would you do that? It's stupid. So you change your mind. People are going to change their mind because it doesn't make any sense. The cost benefit ratio is not there. And it used to be, made sense before. If you had to keep books dry in these buildings and these smart people knew those books and wanted to teach it to your kid, that's the most efficient way to diffuse information at that level of technology. But the technology has changed so radically, it doesn't make any sense anymore. It's just, it's steam engine versus nuclear power. Which one are you going to pick if you need to power a city? Well, some people still do it with steam. What are you going to do?
Yeah,
okay,
very interesting. Why don't we move ahead with your diagram and tell us?
Yeah. Let me talk about that, because, like I said, I come with humility because I'm meeting people that have very advanced thought processes in this, and what I have is a tool that illustrates what they have in their mind. So it's not, and if everyone understood it like this, this would straighten out. I don't know. I call this it's a cognitive earthquake. Here is this diagram. Is people use words trying to explain what they think, but they don't think about what the words mean, and it twists thought, and someone else hears the words and they think something else. So when I came in here, now I start hearing about game A and game B. Okay, we'll throw it into the physics model. Everything fits in the physics model. Let me just accentuate that. It doesn't matter what you're talking about. It fits. It's just a matter of, do you know how to make it fit into the model? It's an omni tool of thought. And I think that's important. I think I'm trying to make this obvious. So right here, we got game A. I heard game A and game B. And what the heck does that mean? I hear different opinions and people are talking about this and that. Well, just map it out in physics and I'll show you. Okay, game A is an environment of scarce resources. Now, if you notice, it's me and you. This would be limited resources, meaning if I benefit, you don't. The pie is one size. If I take two pieces, that means one less for you. This is a limited resource environment. That's game A. And that's the IX logic. That's rational. So you make decisions, and this would be something like, well, anywhere where it benefits you to take from someone else. So what you do things in that game that cost someone else, you benefit. So you're thinking of something that'll help you, and it takes from the other, whatever the other is. So the physical benefits benefit you. Now this is my model. There's more to it, and this is where I want to work with you and get this do act takes from there, but the Q slope, I'm going to use the terms now so people understand. The Q slope of do is from you, it hurts you, but it benefits me. So the slope would go from the action to the thought. So the Q slope would be this downward slope from red to purple over time. So it's represented in 2D, and this is where you have some awesome ideas here, and I don't know how to map it out. I think this is the simplest way, but I know there are other ways to do it, and I'd love to have a 3D model where you see this color change, where the resource goes from red for the other person, and it changes to purple for you. So that's benefit, that's good for you, but it's bad for the other person. Limited resources. Game B is when there are no more physical resources to fight over, you're in game B. So that's IP, that's all psychological, because you don't worry about starving to death, you don't worry about a lion attacking, you don't worry about those things anymore. So at that point, you're in game B. And this is what I think I want to impress. I think I'm right here, and this is where I want to hear people that have thought more about this. But it's interesting how the colors match up. In game A, money is power, and red. That's war. That's actual people dying over resources. Game B is played, the baseline is money, and the forefront is ideas. So what's the best idea? That's the most valuable. Game A, money is the most valuable thing. Game B, money is the least valuable thing. You're working on the other half of the thing. You want the most productive idea, the idea that makes the most people happy. So notice right here, it changed from me to we. Game A, it's me and you. Game B, it's me and we. So at this point, since you aren't fighting over resources, every benefit benefits both parties.
Maybe we should just mention to the audience what the game A, game B idea, I think it comes from, well, the first place I saw it was, I think his name is Daniel Schmachtenberger. And
Yeah.
he talked about game A sort of centering around like what happens at a civilization when your model is a zero-sum model, which is what SupraLibrix is talking about right now. Like, for one person to gain necessarily means another person is losing. And his argument is basically that that model cannot work long term because it's eventually going to create so much damage to the commons that the commons won't be able to support civilization anymore. And game B is this hypothetical alternative strategy for civilization that doesn't lead to that catastrophe at the end. So
yeah,
it's answering the question of, given that we live in a world which is essentially zero sum materially, there's only one planet Earth, right? How do we deal with that fact and also not destroy our civilization in the process of sort of navigating the various differentials between wealth and prestige that various people possess?
Beautiful. Yes, beautiful. Now, not only that, it's not zero sum either, because there's entropy. You're losing energy. So you've got a limited battery pack here. Now, in human terms, it's unlimited. You know, we're not going to see the end of available energy. So in real terms, that's not true. But it's not useful to think like that. If you think of it as a limited amount, and that's where we need to go if we want to get past game A, is you have to think of it in that terms. Why would you? I mean, you just think about it. The climate change debate is a good one. It's a closed system. If you put one molecule of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, well, that changes the climate. That's a fact. How much? Well, you can't even measure it, but it changes the climate. So how about if you put 100,000 tons into the atmosphere every year? Well, that probably changes it more than one. How much? I don't know. You ask the right person, we're all going to die in a couple of years. You ask someone else, well, it's already too late. We may as well just stop trying to do anything. You know, it doesn't matter what, this is where I get into, it doesn't matter what the facts are. If you believe that climate change is the biggest threat to mankind, there's nothing you can do to change that person's mind because you can't prove it's wrong. It's an idea. There are people that tell them that. There are people smarter than whatever your thought is. There's someone smarter than you that tells you that you're right, I guess is the Whatever your fears are, well, there they are, confirmed by someone who's smarter than you are. So where do you go with that? And you can't prove otherwise. You talk about a model into 5, 10, 20 years into the future, and well, maybe most of the eastern seaboard will be underwater. Maybe. You can't prove it's not, right? And look at this model here. This model says it's going to happen. So you don't have any way to disprove it. So you just believe it or not. You say it's pseudoscience, and you say they're picking numbers. Well, you don't know. Well, forget all that. Why are we even talking about that? Because nobody knows the future. You got models, and some models are good, some models aren't. Just look at the hard facts. How much carbon dioxide can go into the atmosphere without causing problems? I don't know. Nobody knows that. But if you keep doing the rate we are, probably something's going to change, guaranteed. And if you look at the model, yeah, things have changed. How much? I don't know. Some people still think it doesn't happen. Some people do. So stop talking about it. Why don't you stop putting carbon dioxide in the air in massive amounts? Because that doesn't make sense anyway, not if you have an alternative. So if you, part of the model is, and this is, if you think of everything in terms of the closed system, you're fighting entropy, well, just find the least entropic way to provide anything. So if you need you need electricity, okay, well, what's the least entropic way to do that? That's it.
And so on your diagram, if we're at the purple end, does that mean that it's taking less entropy?
Well, okay, so here's where it's a little bit, game B means we don't have to worry about taking resources. We don't have to, all resources are shared. This is the end of the explicit understanding that all resources are shared amongst all of us. We live in a closed system. So anything that's good for all of us will also be good for you. And if you don't think that, well, then you're thinking game A. Now, at a personal micro level, that's at the global level. At the personal micro level, well, everything changes because almost everyone has to exist in a game A of some sorts. You have to, well, I got to keep warm this winter, and I don't have any alternative other than burning oil, because that's what my house has, and it would cost me $30,000 to change the system, you know, whatever. That everyone has to make these decisions. But the idea is to put as a total mindset of, we have enough resources, let's just use them wisely. Because we do. You look at the earth, there's all sorts, there's plenty of energy, there's plenty of raw materials to make everybody happy. We just aren't doing it very well. We aren't doing it at all for a lot of people. So the game B plan is make everybody happy all the time. So that's utopia, right? How do you get there? And no, it's not going to happen, not realistically. But that's at least the goal. If it's not, well, that's not someone who should be directing massive amounts of resources. If their goal is, if they're playing game A, they're thinking about what's good for them. Well, they're going to win if they're adept. You look, here's well, Amazon. Now, Amazon, that one's different because how many people benefit from something showing up their house 2 days after they say, Alexa, give me some toilet paper, right? So there's tremendous benefit there, but at the same time, it's not, the benefit goes to Amazon much more disproportionately, just because, well, they draw from the whole world model. They find the lowest possible labor and materials, everything at the lowest point, and they have the world to draw from, but you have your limited environment that you draw from. So anyway, you want what's best for everyone, and then that should draw your actions more up the slope. So what's a little bit more what's a little interesting here is the slope matches entropy, right? So you're going up, entropy goes up. And the irony there, I think all the paradoxes in the human existence are that we need to chase entropy. We can't avoid it, but we need to locally. Now I get spun around here.
Yeah,
we try to decrease entropy locally.
The irony is basically like we live in a universe where the entropy always increases, but our lives are made better when we seek to oppose that direction.
Yes,
When we
exactly.
make things more ordered, things are better. And basically the argument is that like the more ordered your thought process, the less entropy, the better.
Yeah. Right.
So that maybe that's a bit of a difficult concept, because the entropy, like we can't stop entropy from increasing, but we can slow the rate of increase. So when you've slowed it down as much as possible, that's basically your optimum situation.
Right. So we want to slow down entropy as much as possible and make people happy at the same time. So everybody happy all the time means the ideal slope of entropy, I guess is a way to do that.
Well, some people are not very capable. So I would argue that the best way is to make it such that anybody who wants to do self-improvement has the means to do so. But the fact of the matter is that not everybody really is interested in self-improvement, but just leaving the door open, I think that goes a long way because it motivates people to be better.
Yeah, well, not only opening the door, but all of a sudden here it is in full color. Look, here's what we want, and everybody wants the same thing. You know, they want to be happy, they want to do whatever. Everyone's got their own idea of what quality is. But if we all have the same mindset of, okay, optimal quality is the most efficient use of resources to make everybody happy. And instead of the most efficient use of resources to make me happy, well, you can make yourself happy along with everyone else if you do the right things. So that's the balance is between the me and we. And you have to take care of yourself. You have to, every action you take is somewhere in between helping other people and helping yourself. And sometimes it's all just for you, but some things you have to do to make sure that you're ready to help someone else. And that's every decision in life is like that. So part of the whole concept is every philosophy, every ideology is based around that model of chasing entropy in the least entropic way, following entropy by without being able to control it. It's fixed.
Sort of like riding the tiger type of thing.
Yeah, you got no choice. You're on the tiger. Well, have a good time while you're there. Make sure everyone else is having a good time too. So as long as everyone has that same goal, it doesn't matter what your ideology, it doesn't matter what your religion, it doesn't matter your race or your chromosomes or all those things that people argue about are irrelevant now. They should be, they aren't, because they're politically valuable and they're monetarily valuable. But in reality, they're irrelevant as long as everyone shares the ideology of, look, it's for the benefit of all. So that goes into the hippy dippy stuff of why can't we all just get along, and why peace, love, and happiness, and because that's true. That's what everyone wants. It's hippy dippy, but it's hippy dippy because everybody wants it. So how do you get there?
Well, if everyone wants it, how come we don't have it?
Well, because it's not valuable to act. It's not valuable to think that way. If you're in game B, it's more valuable to think of yourself. If you're adept at capitalism and you think of yourself, well, you're going to make a lot of money. You'll do things. Now, this is where it gets a little tricky. This is an exaggeration where you do things to hurt others, because in reality, we're always in a mix of game A and game B, and capitalism leverages that, because that square in capitalism, that square is not there. If you did something that hurt everyone, well, you wouldn't be able to sell it for very long. It wouldn't take long before no one would buy it. If you're selling rattlesnakes that bite every time, how big's your market? So for capitalism, the square is roughly somewhere in here, or you can't sell your product. It has to be good for you, and it has to be good for whoever your market is. If the square is at the top, everybody would want it, and it wouldn't help you. It would help you marginally. But the square is somewhere in between. This is probably a good model for. This would be perfect capitalism right here, where you're thinking of helping everybody, and you do something that helps both you and someone else, and that difference there is how much money you make. Is that
Well, the way I see it is capitalism basically can't be part of game B because the capitalistic model exports negative consequences to the commons that have never been really accounted for past some carbon tax credits and schemes that don't even serve the purpose they were intended for?
Well, are you sure about that? People say their intent is, what do they intend to do? Was it intended to lower emissions, for example? I don't know about that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. The capitalistic model precludes game B because the capitalistic model functions on the basis of like a have and have not. So it is going to be exporting all of its undesirable effects to the commons.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
And that's essentially why people like Schmachtenberger make the argument that it's self-terminating. Because if the environment gets too polluted, eventually it can't support life anymore. So it's that type of argument. I don't exactly see how capitalism as it exists right now can fit into a game B model, but I don't think we can avoid commerce as a species. It's like the crazy people who say you can get rid of money. It's like, that would be like getting rid of houses because roofs leak, right? It's just not going to happen. It's basically a, like you could call it a social institution at this point. There's basically no going back.
Right. Yes, I think you're right about that. However, let me what I see as an alternative is just a little bit. I lived in the Amazon for a little while, not long, but enough to understand they don't have money down there. Your money is your value to the group. You don't it's all in people's heads.
This brings me to a really important concept that I'm always harping on is the idea of social prestige, which I also call cult prestige. I've used the term cult prestige. Cult prestige is a little more general than social prestige. You could argue that social prestige comes from cult prestige. Cult prestige is sort of the engine of influence. It's where everything comes from. And then you have social prestige, which is like this, you could almost think of it as like a grade. Like remember in high school where there was like the cool people and then the uncool people. So it still kind of works like that in greater civilization. It's just that people respond to different hierarchies, right? Like for example, for you just never cared about the social media thing. Whereas for somebody else, they would need to have a social media presence just in order to fuel their own social prestige.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not only like that. It's exactly like that. It's the same thing. So you map it out on the I don't know what to call it yet, but you map it out in the physics model here, and all it is what you think and what can be proven. And now that's a trick, and I don't want to get into that argument, but what people agree is true. What people agree, generally speaking, can be proven, and then what people think about that. So this is where you get into that area of what's a fact. A fact is, well, whatever you believe about a given measurement, whether you believe that person and whether you believe it really happened and to what degree. So you put that in X and you work that out as far as what can be proven, and then what you think about that. Oh shoot, I lost my train of thought.
I think we can prove that every single human cares about social prestige, but that they don't define it in the same way.
Exactly.
Like
So
your Bushman example. They had
Yep.
their own social hierarchy, right?
Yep.
And people cared a lot about the social hierarchy. Whereas in the West, we kind of have this intermediary of money where it's like,
That's right. Yep.
I don't really need to like do what would traditionally be required to do to get high social prestige. I can just have this huge bank account, and that's basically the same thing.
Yep. So let me show you, for example, is here. Let me adjust this. I'm gonna do it right on the fly here. So here's an example of. Let me see. Carnegie, is that how you spell his name?
For those of us who don't come from United States, will you tell us about Carnegie, who he was?
Yeah, so he was, well, now I can't remember. Was he steel or oil? I think it was oil, right? But he made a lot of money with resources at the time, which was
Yeah, I don't know much about the guy. I just know that there's a place called Carnegie Hall that I've heard
so
before.
what he did, he had tremendous resources, made all sorts of money. And what do you do with it? Well, he spent it on these things that helped everyone. So that action of building a library, building an opera hall, whatever, all these things, people like those things. So he spent his money this way, and whatever else he got for himself, but he spent that money in order to benefit other people. At least that's what he thought, and a lot of people agreed. So people that went to his Carnegie Hall are benefiting from the money that he spent. So that's what I see as a model going forward. Is the oil barons of yore are now tech barons, and what are they doing? They need a way to prove that they need a way to prove their intent, because everybody's mad at them now. You get people on the left saying they're censoring, you get people on the right saying they're censoring. You get everybody mad at them when they're providing the most valuable service in human, well, yes, everything's plus or negative, right? But the most efficient way to transfer thought in history is what the tech billionaires have done. And that's extremely valuable. And they made a lot of money because of it. So what are they doing with it? And well, who are you going to ask? What do you believe? I don't know specifics. I don't know how they're spending their money. But if everyone's mad at them, they aren't spending it right. They don't, the mental checkbook that people have, the social score of tech is not great right now. Conservatives are really upset. And I see a little bit, and I gotta be careful because I don't watch a lot of news. I don't consume much media. I never have, never watched the news, never interested. We're fortunate here in America that we don't worry about politics too much. We don't worry about getting invaded, generally speaking. So there's a lot of benefits to that, and one of them is you don't worry about politics. But now everybody's worried about politics. So I got interested in the phenomenon. But this is what it boils down to, is that social score that people have in their head doesn't match up with what they see in reality. They see, well.
Yeah, that's actually perfect. I was just thinking about how to express that idea. And I think that the social unrest largely comes from not the fact that there's a wealth disparity, but the fact that the people who possess the wealth don't appear to be using it for benevolent purposes.
Yeah, and maybe they are somewhere, and I'm sure there's a lot of money spent on good things, but you know what? It isn't working because people.
There's a lot of money spent on looking good, but that's just virtue signaling. That's not the same thing as actually fixing a problem.
Right. So that's one of the big plans here, is to create a market for the virtue signaling. So you can say, well, I'm for this, Black Lives Matter. Okay. Now here we can throw that on the map. Black Lives Matter, that statement. What does that mean? Okay, well, it means on the map, it would be well, taking the set of black people, all of them matter. That's good, right? That's where we want to be. We want to be up there. Okay, then you have the counter. Well, all lives matter. Well, yeah, that's true too. So where's that one? Well, they overlap. They're saying the same thing. It's just that the perceived power isn't balanced. So you have people that are upset. You have social unrest because those in power haven't used their power in a way that the people who don't feel like they're benefiting.
I kind of feel like their motto is "No lives matter." I feel like their motto is "Profit and building statues of yourself matters."
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's it. And they're trying to convince people otherwise. Well, you aren't doing a good job, so you need some PR help. So that's sort of my if you match the Q slope of the people's minds, you'll see that some people are in the red zone about something that you did. So if everybody thought you were great, your social score would be up here. Well, you'd be in the blue zone, blue, purple, whatever. People are happy with you. If people are unhappy with you, it's either real or it's imaginary. You don't know which. We'll find out. Why the riots that are going on? Why are they unhappy? Well, they didn't benefit from the system. Are you going to tell them that it's not racist? Are you going to tell them that there's no the big thing now is the white supremacy and the systemic racism, that's a problem. So how can you argue against that? Because it doesn't matter what's true. That's the way it's perceived. And if you try to disprove it, well, you're not going to be able to, because that's the way the power structure is right now. And there's no argument against it to someone who perceives it to be the problem. There's nothing to talk about. You have no argument.
The only thing you could really disagree on is the mechanism, right? Like, you can't disagree that the West has more money power per unit person.
Yeah.
And that there's no good reason for it. That cannot be denied. Like, there's no real reason why there should be all this money in the West and relatively no money in the East, right? That is basically what I think people are getting at. Now, the exact way that it works, I don't think most people understand. So they, like, propaganda pushes them towards this narrative of what you're calling the white supremacy.
Yeah.
Which is just sort of, I think it's largely a straw man, because it's not really presenting the issue in a way that it can be resolved.
Right. Well, that's where you get into words and their intent, and in reality, and it doesn't matter what's true. It doesn't matter if the boogeyman's out there or not, right? You're still not going to go out into the woods. So if you say white supremacy, or you say there's no argument against that, because all the evidence is there for someone who's looking for it. So it doesn't matter what the truth is. And with the model, I don't care. It ignores all race, it ignores all DNA and nurture. All it does is examine behavior and what people think about the behavior. So it doesn't matter who's thinking about it. It doesn't matter what was done. It just labels it. So you bring in any kind of any racism is inferred. This just demonstrates what is. And then if you want to bring in your own biases, okay, that's on you. It's not in the math. You pick what you want to think about the math. So you tackle a big social problem like the disparity in wealth is the biggest one. It doesn't matter what you say. There's huge disparity. So why are people upset? Well, because there's disparity. You're in a loop. There's no way out. So how do you fix that? Well, you have.
Well, do you understand that there's always been disparity?
Yeah. So first of all, understand that that's normal.
Why would people think that there shouldn't be disparity is my question.
Right. Well, here's the reason it's there is because we're aware of it. There are people that have no power other than a cell phone who can have as much influence as someone who has a $1 billion media company. The means to communicate ideas has been democratized to the point where the cost is zero, essentially. So now this is game B. Game B is, look, this is just ideological, just ideas. Whatever idea is the most influential is the one that will be paid attention to. That's a loop of a phrase, but What I mean is it doesn't matter what the idea is, if it's attractive or if it strikes a chord in the person, well, that's the one that they're going to run with. So you take a reality where the disparity of wealth is so huge, and it's always been there. It's always been like that. And then all of a sudden, oh, wait a minute, now everybody can talk about it between themselves. It used to be, how much did it cost to send a letter to across the world? Well, it cost whatever your stamp costs, plus it cost how many months for the boat to go across the ocean, then land, and maybe they didn't drown on the way over there and hit an iceberg or something. That's how much it costs to communicate. Well, now it costs nothing. Free speech is free, physically free next to it. So when you have that, you have this inundation of information that never existed before. It was in people's heads, but they weren't able to communicate. The cost of communication was so high. Then you get into radio stations and TV stations, and then you had people, in order to transmit information, it was a function of money. And all of a sudden, money's not an issue. Now it's just ideas. So you have free ideas. Whichever one hits, well, that's the one that's going to be on the top of the list. So what's at the top of the list? Disparity of wealth. Because all of a sudden what was always true is all of a sudden recognized in a format that everybody can complain about it, to the point where, well, let's just burn it down, because that will change things no matter what. Probably not for the best. If you watch the Q slopes, burn things down, likely they won't get the change that they want. And what you do with that is you draw people down towards the lower left, where you put right back into game A.
One lesson that's important to learn is that it's easy to increase the entropy. It's easy to destroy things, but karma's real, and if you destroy things, like, just take a look at what's happening to the churches right now. They're getting all their statues destroyed. How did those churches come to power in the first place? By destroying other statues. So these things do eventually come around to bite you.
Yeah.
And now I feel like we've got a powder keg.
Yes, yeah, we certainly do. We certainly do. Now, this is my hope, and I've got a woman we're working with that works with some people directly in contact with the Dalai Lama. So I don't know how to present this, but it's a way to demonstrate what's going on in a new way. It's a new tool to demonstrate reality in a way that makes things obvious that weren't before. I think that's the way to think about it. So let me see. Let me bring up my universal model here of power. And from what I can tell, this creates cognitive dissonance in every single person I've shown it to. And I like that, because I love cognitive dissonance. It means I'm learning something. Most people don't like that. If they have a fixed opinion, they don't want cognitive dissonance. So let me stop 1 second here.
Yeah, I mean, people's relationship with cognitive dissonance is a pretty accurate predictor for their behavior.
Exactly. So now
because
here it is.
We can generalize. We can generalize and say, like, nobody enjoys cognitive dissonance, but not everybody reacts to it in the same way.
Right, and they don't even know that's what it is. Sometimes if it hasn't been explained to you and you don't know the concepts, then that term itself isn't even useful. But this is a way to make it visual to a point that you could explain this to a 5th grader and they would understand it, or less probably. So let me go over this ideological civilization. Have you seen this one before? I think we ran past it, but I don't know if did you pay attention to this one at all?
I saw it. I didn't fully understand it, and now I'm a bit confused, because I thought when you went towards the purple end, it meant it was lower entropy, and anarchy and communism would appear to be the highest entropy systems.
Yes, they are. So that's the paradox. So let me explain this. Let me explain this slide right here. So what you take is the singularity of power would be someone who has complete moral authority, meaning whatever they say goes. Everyone has to do what they say, and they have all physical power. So that would be. So now I don't. that would be God in a Christian ideology. Now, I don't think they have that. You know this a lot better than me. Do they have a singular power in any of the Eastern philosophies? I don't think they do. It's more of an all than one single authority. Is that right?
Well, they've traditionally been governed by dictators. So a king, or if you take someone like Genghis
right.
Khan.
No, but I mean like Buddhism. There isn't a single authoritative source of information. Is that right?
Well, the Veda is considered the single authoritative source, which is a revealed body of scripture. And basically the way it works is, so I'll tie them together the best way that I can. So basically you have Vedic knowledge. That's the root of everything. And then you have people who try to access this knowledge.
Okay.
And they can't all access it to the same degree, right? So the one who can access it best is considered to have divine authority. And that is the root of what the Chinese call the divine, I believe they call it the mandate of heaven. That may be a mistranslation, but that's how it's cataloged on Wikipedia. But yeah, this idea that God grants the right to rule is pretty ubiquitous, East and West. But in the East, you have a more developed, systematized approach to determining where this supreme sovereign will comes from. Whereas in the West, it's more of a might makes right. Whoever has the biggest army gets the right to rule.
Yeah. Perfect. So what's interesting, the model here integrates East and West philosophies. So in the West goes to, well, there is a single authority. In the East, it's the opposite. The authority exists. It's just a matter of who can interpret it best. Is that right? Is that a good way to say it?
Well, there's a single authority either way. It's just a question of what is the nature of this singular authority, right? Like who is to say who is the authority on the Veda, because it's a living tradition and it has various schools, which at various points in history have been considered the supreme school. So it has to go into this arbitration process, which is basically like a formalized, systematized debate. But it does eventually lead to one person being granted that divine mandate or mandate of heaven, or however you want to put it. Basically, one person is chosen among many to be the law bringer because they have the best knowledge of what is actually knowledge. Therefore, they can apply that knowledge to making laws.
Okay, beautiful. That makes sense. Okay, so now everything fits in here. So whatever you say in words will fit on this here somewhere. That's the unique aspect this brings. But at the extreme, you have one single person has all power and all moral authority over everyone else, meaning whatever they say goes. Okay, that would be one extreme. The other extreme is, well, the moral authority is shared by everyone. No one is superior to the other. Everyone's idea is equally good, and no one has superior power over another. So that would be anarchy. Now,
so it sounds like what your diagram is doing is basically showing the distributed power model. So on the bottom left, you have the power sort of funneled into one single person, whereas on the top right, you have the distributed model where everybody theoretically has the same amount of power. Would that be accurate?
Yes, exactly. So everyone shares the same knowledge and everyone shares the same idea of what's right and wrong. Now, if that were true, anarchy and communism would work great. There wouldn't be any fighting because they all share the same values. What are you going to fight about? If you're in game B and everybody knows that you share resources, and if you take from someone, that means they suffer, and you don't benefit because your social score will go down if you're making other people suffer, well, there's nothing to fight about. You just come up with good ideas and work together and everything's pretty happy. So you find
you have incentivization to improve the commons. When it's working, and I'm not saying that it can, because I think it's axiomatically flawed, but if it was going to work, the result would be that everybody was incentivized / motivated to improve the commons.
Exactly. Yes. So that's utopia, and that's not realistic, but at least you know what to look for.
I think it's realistic. I think it's
Excuse me.
realistic because if people can have a spiritual transition, then they can have that. They can learn to have the attitude that the best way to approach life is to wake up and ask, like, what can I do for the commons? What
Yes.
can I do for civilization? And to have a service oriented approach, and that does work. And there's demonstrated,
Yeah, well, it happens all the time. I'm in Maine here. We've got some Mennonite communities, and they're kind of like the Amish. I don't know the specific differences there, but if you take a single ideology and put them all together, they'll migrate toward this model because they all share the same belief system. If everyone believed the same thing, then there's nothing to fight about. All you got to worry about is the problem makers, and then they have whatever system they use in their culture to take care of the problem makers. But it doesn't make sense for you, and this is where it's valuable in a small community. Everyone has this little tally in their head. Their social score is just kept mentally. If everyone agrees that, yep, that guy, he's pretty good, and yep, that girl over there, she does this and this, and if that tally is kept mentally, then there's no reason to have any other system. Of course, you throw a modern world at it, and you've got money, and money itself becomes a tally. Instead of the mental tally, you have money. Well, this person has this and this and this, so they are especially adept. So you take a hunter-gatherer mindset. Well, this guy knows how to hunt and gather money, and he's got all sorts of it. He's got so much that he's got this and this. So it's what you're fighting, the human nature of, I need to collect, I need to store up for the winter, I need to have enough to take care of me and my family. You have to have that. You throw that mindset into a moneyed system, and you have people, some people are better hunters and gatherers than others. So you have people that are very rich, and you have people that just can't compete or don't want to compete, and they're very poor. So they depend on the social structure. They depend on the culture to take care of them if they can't compete monetarily. All the time. That's
essentially what civilization is.
Right. Yeah. And that's all there. It's just that money is thrown in this wrench into the works that there's no way to avoid it.
I think I agree with you. Like this idea of a mental tally, and I'm thinking of like some sort of civilizational law where if everyone agrees about the mental tally, you have harmony, and
that's right.
And money kind of throws a wrench into that, and people stop agreeing about whose status is what, and that's where the discord comes from.
Yep, that's it. So that's why I picked money. If you have a tool that examines and can change what words mean, well, which one would you pick? You pick money, because money is the biggest interrupter of information flow. It changes.
Oh, I like that. That's a great idea. That's an idea that should be developed further, because it's an extremely succinct way of conveying an extremely pervasive phenomenon.
Yep, I think it's that is the idea, that once it's realized, that's what's going to change the world, is the fact that, look, we're not in game A anymore. This is game B, because we have X number of resources. If you think you can take, and there's no cost, well, and if that cost is borne by people who you don't see, well, why would you even consider that cost? It wouldn't make sense to even think about the cost if you don't see it. You're comfortable, you have everything you want, you do whatever you want, and all the costs, the social costs, are borne somewhere else. There's no reason to think of that, not realistically.
Yeah, so maybe one of the solutions is to force the realization of the cost into a more proximal state.
There you go.
Because if people could see all of the consequences of everything that they did, they wouldn't do most of what they do.
That's it. That's exactly it. So that gets into my Q slope. The Q logic and Q slope is, what is the logic behind your actions? Well, if it's always up in the top left there, if everything you intend to do is to benefit you and everyone else too at the same time, well, you're likely to get a better result. And you can't guarantee that, because you'll try to do something nice and maybe you mess up or whatever. And some people are angry. That happens. To ignore that mistakes were made and you didn't mean to do that. That always happens. So stop talking about that. Find out what happened and fix it. That's ultimately how you fix anything. So my big idea is, once this takes the universal consciousness of, and it's not only is it intuitive, but it's based on real science and facts. There's no argument that, okay, purple light transmits ideas at a higher energy rate than red light. Okay, and that's also intuitive. Red's the color of blood. That's bad. Green, that's good, average. No, it doesn't hurt me. As long as everyone in power has the mindset that whatever they do is to benefit the commons, that'll benefit them too. And there's a break in communication there, because the people in power, well, they're doing great. And the people who don't have power, some are doing great. Enough of them that those people who are doing great are still in power. But now you have this acceleration of transfer of thought, and you have people that aren't doing great, and all of a sudden they have a voice that they never had before. So you get the internet, you've got video, you've got everything going on in the news is people that didn't have a voice before. There was just no way to communicate the situation. So there you say, how do you bring that closer? Well, it's happening right now. You see the news is filled with that. And that in turn is used to acquire power. So people will take, okay, there's an idea. They're upset about this. Okay, they say it's systemic racism. Okay, we'll run with that. Doesn't matter if it's true or not, we'll run with it. And you can't prove it's not true, because those people, it's true. And there's no way you can dissuade them, because it is true. It doesn't matter if you disagree with that. The facts are there to lay out that case, and there's no way you can change that. So you have to change the physical surroundings of those people for them to even agree that there's been any change at all. And is that happening? I don't know. We'll see.
I think the problem is that people spend so much effort on rhetoric and virtue signaling, but there's not any effort put into accountability. It's like, if society was good, what would it look like? And it sort of proves the point that we are evolved to live in a system where the people who have disproportionate power are benevolent. Because there's this enormous amount of, like you say, political awakening going on in the United States, right? Because they're starting to realize that the power they've conferred upon the state is not being used benevolently.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So here's the fix. Now we have a new tool that exists. It's called the Q slope and Q logic. Those are the two new tools. Now the Q slope is, let's see, I think I got it right here. It's the slope of quality. So let's see. What you can map is intent over action. What's the coefficient of quality? How about that? What you say is rhetoric. What you do is what matters, what other people think about. Or I should say, your rhetoric is what you say, and then what you do is what can be measured. So you say, okay, I'm going to chicken in every pot. Everyone's going to be happy and wealthy, and everybody's going to be good. So people believe, they want to believe that. Everybody wants to be up in that top right-hand corner. Everybody wants everyone to be happy. So if you say that, and you have power, well, people will believe you, because look, you're in power, you're talking, you're making sense. That's what I want. So you vote for them. Okay, then you check, well, okay, you said this was going to happen. Did it happen? Oh, it didn't happen. Not quite. Well, how close? The distance between the rhetoric and the actions can be measured in color now. You can take the slope of someone's rhetoric, then take the slope of their actions, and you end up with a coefficient of quality. Over time, you'll see the people that are able to affect what they say, and you'll see the people that don't. So whoever has the best coefficient of quality, well, they should be running the place. Why would you pick anyone else? Why would you pick someone that says stuff and doesn't make it happen? That doesn't make any sense. That'd be stupid. So you have a new model to measure who should be in charge. So what you want is, you want someone whose slope, ideally, there's no slope at all. They are always doing things that are good for everyone else and themselves all the time, and all their actions lie in the top right-hand corner. Is that going to happen? I don't know. But you want the guy who is, his actions match closest his intentions. That's what you want. That's the coefficient of...
The coefficient of non-hypocrisy?
Say again, the coefficient of what?
I said the coefficient of non-hypocrisy?
Yeah, let's call it the coefficient of ability, of honesty, of dependability. How much do you do what you say you're going to do? Everyone has their own. This is what I'm saying. Everyone has their own tallies in their head. This is nothing new. It's nothing new. It's just a new way to represent it in a way that can be recorded, put it on a piece of paper. You can print it out. You can email it around and say, look, this is this guy's coefficient of quality. He says he can do this, and he does not that. He does something really bad. Well, he's in the wrong place. Well, why do we still listen to that person? And it's something we do all the time, all by ourselves. Anyone, everyone has their own tallies in their head of who they can trust, who they can't. This maps those mental tallies can now be displayed in color in a uniform format that the whole world can see. Big idea would be, well, this country has this color, and one of the ideas I have is an app. If everyone had an app, pick a quality, any quality, and then poll everyone. What's the color of this quality? And then just go through your problems. How about sanitation? Well, these people here are great, and these people aren't. We'll fix it. This new project here, we're gonna make this happen here. We're gonna put a new park in, and all these people are gonna be happy. Okay, so then you take a poll 6 months later. Okay, yeah, we got more purple pixels here because these people are happy with it. Oh, wait a minute. Now, whatever, there's a pigeon infestation. Now there's some red pixels.
I really like that. I really like that because it means that people's mental processes are immaterial to your calculations.
Exactly.
Because they're both subject to the same subjective bias, so it cancels itself out because you're comparing apples to apples. So I like that one.
Yep. It's now what it takes into account is, over time, there's a lot of stuff that can come out of this. You talk about a quality slope that a computer can generate. What you'll end up with over time is you'll have certain threads. So you can watch this slope right here, this blue slope or the red slope. Either one, you watch the difference. See what trajectory is that Q slope follow, and you can predict the future from that. If someone's always doing things to help others, and you do it in your head all the time, this person, I can depend on this person. If you need help with something, well, who do you call? You call the person that you know in your head is best, that's on the Q slope that is most likely to coincide with yours, that will help you. If you need help on your math, you don't ask the guy who flunked every test. Why would you? That'd be stupid. You ask the guy that's really good at it. Or the girl in your case. Holy cow, you're awesome. So it's a way to quantify quality in a uniform format. And over time, quality will be identified and be selected for, because why would you pick anything else? You see that in culture is, without a definition of quality, it's just a matter of who gets the most attention. So it's interesting. I'm 49, so let's see, I was born in 71. Music is an interesting one to follow, because music in my lifetime went from, well, I was first aware of it. I never really listened to the radio much. I don't know, probably late 70s. So sort of the rock and the disco was all mixed up. There was a huge diaspora of music with the new electronic tools. All of a sudden there were sounds that no one could ever make before. So people are trying different things, and then you get into punk rock and then rap, and you have these evolutions of, hey, here's a new tool, let's use it, let's see what happens, let me make this sound. Oh, okay, how about I make this sound? And you throw all these things together and you end up with chaos. And out of that chaos you get, well, some of it's good, some of it's bad, and whatever gets the most, sells the most records is the best music, right? Not really. How do you determine quality? You ask my dad, oh, that's garbage music, turn that down. It's not quality to him, but it sold 10 million records. So what is quality? If you measure it with money, Michael Jackson's better than Beethoven, right?
I've got an idea.
Yep.
For a test of concept. So what we want to do is answer the question of is the blue you perceive the same as the blue I perceive? Because we want to know eventually if this model can get to a point where it's intuitive. And that's a real challenge because we don't really necessarily understand how we think, but certain things, i.e. memes, and memes sort of prove this idea that certain ways of presenting information are far better than others. So you could do a test run where you have people listen to music and they have to fill out certain pieces of information, like maybe the year they were born. And I'm not sure what other pieces of, you wouldn't need to gather that much information because all you want to do is see if you have them listen to a type of music and ask them to click on a graph that's one of your color graphs and tell them, ask them what color does this music represent to you, and then and then you look at the long-term results and you see if there's any patterns that emerge in that. That would be so cool.
Yeah, it would be. So here's where it gets, it gets real interesting. So what is funny? Music and funny. That one I found most interesting because we've got a complete divergence of what humor is. You can't laugh at certain things. Now, to know what's funny, you have to know what is sacred, because you can't make fun of what people hold dear to themselves. Now, how do you know that? You know, with your friends, you know what's funny and what's not. But how would you map that out and record it? So that's one of the things. When I first ran into Kurt, I saw what he was working on. Kurt Doolittle there. This was like, I don't know, a couple months ago. Someone directed me here because I've been working on this a long time and I'm trying to find traction, but I didn't have the pretty colors. So it was so abstract and in the math model that it didn't make enough sense to really catch on, except I had a few people that kind of knew but never quite got it. But now it's really starting to click with people. But anyway, I knew what I had, and then someone said, well, go look at Kurt. So I checked his stuff out, and what he did, he did it in words. He did basically the same thing. He set up his logic. He did almost the whole thing I did, except in words. And it's really interesting. I'd like to know if someone did the same thing in another language. Because in English, you end up with, well, words themselves are thoughts. They have their own connotations. You can't separate the connotation from the word because that's what the word is. Now, how do you feel about that connotation? That's what counts. So when I first saw Kurt, I messaged him. I said, look, how do you define humor? Because I gave him my little equation. Humor is something that's incongruent with your Q slope that benefits you or that doesn't hurt you. So he didn't answer that. And that's when I knew I was on to something. Well, I knew I was, but I was trying to find minds that had come down the same paths. And it's interesting that he thought he was already at the end of the path. But there's two, it's a rabbit hole, and there's two bottoms. So his bottom found, oh, okay, well, this is, because I think it's because it was done in English, his logic, that he ended up with, well, Western philosophy. He took Western philosophy to its mathematical end, which is, well, dictator. You're all powerful. And
yeah, one of his followers posted on Facebook recently about re-education camps. Not a good look.
not a good look.
Our
But-
ideas are so great, we have to force you to go to a re-education camp to believe them. And our ideas are so great, we're not going to debate them. It's just going to come to blows, and you better be on our side, or we're going to burn down a power plant. Poopertarians.
Well, that makes sense, though. So it's logical. If you had one person saying what's right, if they had full moral authority and full physical authority, well, of course you do that. If someone doesn't think what's right, what's best, well, you better change them, right? Because you don't want them hurting society. So a re-education
that he can help society, right? He's just sort of assumed that his approach will work, and if you don't agree, you're dumb.
That's it.
I kind of feel like where I'm coming from is like essentially similar. Like, I do want to be the supreme dictator, but I'm trying to prove it that I deserve to be, because I don't take the responsibility lightly. And if someone comes to me with a question, I'm not going to dismiss them, you know?
Yeah.
And Kurt is just too dismissive. He basically says if things fall outside of what he defines as like truth claims, they're not relevant. So I guess his answer for you for humor was that it's like not relevant.
Right. But that's the most important thing in life, practically, right? I mean,
humor is important because it facilitates people changing their minds. Like, laughing is a coping mechanism for cognitive dissonance. So when you're laughing, like in that type of like jovial mood, that's when it's easiest to change your mind. And if your whole philosophy is about teaching people the truth, shouldn't that matter quite a great deal?
Yeah.
It's basically the question's too complicated. And that's what I like about you, is that you're not shying away from a question just because it's complicated.
Yeah.
And we need that, because we need people who are really willing to like sit back and say, not give people the brush off, actually listen to their question and take the time to give an answer that is going to be satisfactory. And some questions are very hard.
Yeah.
And to pretend that those questions don't matter is to misunderstand the nature of the divine right to rule, because the divine ruler does have the answer to those questions.
Yeah. So that's the, I don't know if it's irony. I don't know. See, the words fail here because words, this is outside the set of words. So it's a way to explain words and what they mean. So with Kurt, what he missed was there are two, at the bottom of the rabbit hole, there are two more rabbit holes.
He said memes were stupid.
What's that? Say again?
He said memes were stupid.
Kurt said that?
Blunder.
Wow. Okay. Now, I don't know how he would come to that conclusion, because that's every political cartoon ever. I mean, that's how the world has been changed, is with memes.
Well, it just sort of shows you how out of touch he is, right? Like, because to me, if someone were to present that to me, I would say, well, yeah, of course, because a picture, like there's that saying, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Like, where do you think that comes from?
Why would you type that much? Just put a picture.
Especially when the picture actually, maybe this is counterintuitive, but I mean, a lot of times people do get their minds changed by pictures more often than words. And like you say, words are not the starting point and shouldn't be the starting point, because words come about due to another process.
Due to pictures. Yeah, I mean, you made up words to match pictures, right? You look at something, then you give it a name.
Well, sure. I mean, you just have to think of it biologically, like stimulus-wise. You are getting, like, your eyes have a majority shareholder on the stimulus that your mind experiences.
Yeah.
I don't know if anyone would disagree with that. Like, maybe some people have a bit different sensory systems and they're more sensitive in the other senses. But I would say for most people, the eyes is like, the visual cortex is contributing like probably 40% of the stimulus to the mind.
Yeah, I mean, well, it has to be, if you're living in a dangerous world, you got to watch out for the boogeyman, right? So
so what that tells us is something about just the human learning process, that images, when done properly, will always be more intuitive than words, because we don't have a real world analog for words. Words are the analog to the real world.
Exactly.
Whereas images have, or can have, a one-to-one correspondence with reality. Words can't.
Right. Yeah. Beautiful. So yeah, that's the eternal problem is, and this is where it's going to get interesting as this goes out there. Because if you talk about books, being well read is a compliment. But if you think about it, a book is someone's experience abstracted into words, and then you abstract the abstraction and hope to have some kind of experience out of that. And it's great for a lot of things. And, you know, I don't want to denigrate reading at all. On the other hand, it depends on what you're trying to do. If you're trying to learn something, a book is the worst thing to learn from in some cases. I just remember my .com days there. It was called what was it? MCSE, Microsoft Certification Program, where supposedly if you took these classes, you would be good at handling Microsoft products. Now, that, in my experience, became a joke. Now, just personally. So, for example, I didn't have that. I learned, oh yeah, well, this is how you make a cable. Okay, and this is how you punch it down, and this is how, and this is how you set the IP address. I learned how to do it by doing it with my hands and eyes and reading here and there to catch up. Okay, no, this is how I do it. I got hands-on education, and I was there a few years, and some guy came on, and he had his certification, and he was the worst hire. Well, he had a paper that said he was good at it, and he came in, he didn't know what he was doing. He had learned one model, and then, oh, well, we have Linux, and then we have Solaris over here. You know, we had a hodgepodge, and your education wasn't useful for us. Maybe someplace else, but not here. So what does well-read mean? It's in the future, it's going to be one of the worst ways to learn anything. Some things it's great for, but a lot of things it's not. The experiences were so much more.
It already is, because if you think about, you know, what is a book, it's a compression of somebody's ideas.
Right.
And what is compression? Well, I don't have to tell you, but maybe for the audience, compression involves removing some information from a system in order to make it easier to store.
Just make it portable. So books are portable.
Books are always compressed.
Yeah.
And the same way JF on his show was talking about how all mathematical statements are axiomatically relative, and the same way with books is all knowledge from a book is relative to this person who wrote it. And there's really no guarantee that that person had any special knowledge.
That's right. You don't even know the source.
Even if they did, according to the natural law and tradition, the only way to really impart certain facets of knowledge is through the oral tradition. You could see us talking now, it's speeding up the process. It's not lossless, but the compression factor is less.
Yes, beautiful.
Like, for example, if I was going to read a book versus talking to you, read your book that you wrote versus talking to you, I mean, it's a completely different experience. And it's going to be a lot more salient, I think, if we're talking.
Yeah, beautiful. Yes, beautiful. Now, I was talking to one of the proprietarians, and that's the problem with, we just talked about the words. They're lossy. You lose whatever connotation the person had when they put it down might not hit you. You might not get it. And if you don't have the same experience, there's no way you'd understand exactly what they mean. So you take your own connotations out of that word. And right there, there's the compression has lost fidelity. So that's the beauty of math. There's no loss of, there's no way to.
There's always loss. Anytime there's any type of observation, there's loss. That's the law of entropy, basically. And it actually works all the way down to like the material of the universe. So what you want is a situation where you can get on the same page, because even though we're speaking the same language, we're not necessarily speaking the same language of ideas. So mathematics is basically a sieve through which you force your mind into such a configuration where no matter who you're talking to, you agree on the axioms.
Yes.
Whereas when you're just talking to a person, you randomly meet someone in some chat group, there's no guarantee of that. But if you force it into math right on the get-go, much better chances of actual communication, because you can see in a systematized way do we actually agree on axioms? In other words, are we approaching the thought and argument forming process in the same manner? And when we're
Yes.
saying something, even if two people say the exact same thing, is it actually the same thing? Well, not necessarily, right?
Yep. But just take a simple math. 2 times 2 equals 4. If you change any character in there, it completely changes the equation. Now, you pick whatever, if you're just doing regular math, 2 times 2 equals 4. That's true everywhere in the world. Until you run to someone like you that says, well, this math is a little bit, I don't know if you can mess with that math there, but you see my point. That in that way, it's lossless.
The way to put it into words is that that statement is true relative to the commonly accepted axioms of mathematics. But
yes,
the thing is that to make a statement like that in the first place requires us to accept axioms that only apply in mathematics, right? Because mathematics is an approach to modeling reality where we say it is possible to have a line of finite length and to subdivide that line into infinitely many parts. That's basically the argument of what they call the real number line. So if you're using those axioms, you accept the modern axioms of mathematics. Of course, 2 times 2 equals 4, but that statement has no meaning outside of those axioms. That's all I'm saying. I'm not saying 2 plus 2 doesn't equal 4. I'm just saying that statements like that should be understood as being existing only relative to their axioms, because there's no way to construct that sense. Like axioms is basically an architecture, and you need that in order to construct arguments. Without the architecture, there's really no arguments. And this is something I keep going back to. Like axioms always come first. Even if you deny that you have axioms, you have de facto axioms. So you might as well just get to the point. What are your axioms? And that will actually speed up the process of information transfer considerably.
Okay. Well, now we have the axioms for life itself. And it's not the axioms are the same. Now, what you think about the axioms, that's the new thing. So do you want to be light purple or do you want to be a different color? Pick a color for your intent, and we'll judge that against your actions. And whatever you think only matters if you have power over someone else. So your axioms are the same. This is what I think is this is the paradigm shift, is we all share the same axioms for life itself. And you can't deny it because it's the same axioms. The same axioms apply to evolution itself, to dolphins, to cockroaches. The same axioms work for humans, except we've got that one extra layer of our where we contemplate our actions. We're able to form these Q slopes in our head. We have our tallies of social scores. So those axioms, if they're unified, if there's a model for those axioms, then we'll approach those axioms.
What you're presenting are a set of sociological axioms or moral axioms, such as it's an ought statement. So when you're approaching it from a scientific perspective, we want to start with what is, because that is easier to agree on than what ought. So what my approach is, basically you have a really good grip on what is, and then you make what ought to be. You make that statement using what is. And basically, for your approach, I would say
why. Sorry, let me interrupt there, because that's the important part. Is I say is because it is that way, and you'll see it as soon as you record it. Let me see if I can give you a good example. Well, right here, I got up on the screen. I don't know if you're looking at this one. Where was it?
Yeah, I can see it. The Q slope.
The Q slope. So, okay, so here's a Q slope of, it's a fact that this person didn't want to buy the car, and this person talked them into it. So it's a fact that slope went from red to green to blue, purple. Okay, so there's you say ought. No, it is. That's exactly what happened. This person didn't want to buy the car, but they bought the car. So what happened? What was the slope of that transaction? Why did they go from, no, I'm not going to buy it, to, yes, I'm going to buy it? Well, this is what happened. This person said certain words and syllables that this person heard, and then that interacted with something in their brain where they realized, yes, I do want to buy it. So that is, it's not what ought to be, it's what is. So you can observe those slopes and compare, well, what did it take to move that slope in that direction? You see what I mean? So when I say...
Yeah, I could see how there's a certain amount of non-oughtness to this approach. I was more thinking along the lines of when you said people's intention ought to line up with their actions. That's an ought. As
okay,
well,
yeah.
The entropy should be diminished. That's another ought. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm just saying from a strategic debate perspective, the strongest way to defend a position of ought is to demonstrate what the result of that ought is, as well as how the result of any other path is undesirable.
Right, yeah. So in a real life application, for example, is, well, you ought to eat right and exercise, right? Everybody knows that. So what if you don't? Some people don't, and they live fine, happy lives, and there's no consequence. Then other people don't, and they end up miserable, sick, and whatever. And, well, was it because they didn't eat right and exercise? No, it was because of something else. There's so many influences that could have affected that, the Q slope of whatever their lifespan, that you can't pin it down. But in this case, once you record all these different influences, and this is a super simple model here, it's just one single influence and two people talking about one single action. Now, who knows what else went on in that blue person's head in this case? It could be any number of reasons why they would change their mind. In this case, it's just broken down to be simple of, well, look, this guy talked him into it. But in reality, you have infinite IX at every moment, and you ignore almost all of it because it doesn't affect your life. The temperature, you don't think about the temperature in the room unless it's too hot or too cold. You don't think about the tide unless, you know, your boat's on shore and you wanted to go fishing that day. You know, those, you see what I mean? All those things can be brought to mind, but they aren't necessarily. So it's the introduction of, out of the infinite influence, what's brought to your attention is what changes your mind. And the ability to bring things to your consciousness that you didn't think of, if they fit up with your preconceptions, well, then you're going to go in that direction. You're going to change your mind according to what's brought up, as long as it lines up with your perceived Q slope. What you believe should be is what you'll do. See what I mean? You gravitate toward a Q slope until someone presents another one that you think is better. So it kind of goes into the space-time where, well, the Earth goes in a straight line in one way to look at it. It's just the shortest way around the sun. Why is it in a circle? Well, it's just the shortest way through gravity to get around to fall, right?
Yeah, I call them space-time geodesics.
Oh, interesting. Let me hear it. No, explain that to me. Let me hear that.
I'll get the definition of what it is. It's a mathematical idea that represents the shortest possible line between 2 points on a particular object. So the geodesic, the standard geodesic that everyone thinks of is just a straight line. But it gets more complicated when you're in a situation where it is not possible to travel via a straight line. So when we are entertaining ideas where it's not a flat causality, the idea of geodesics becomes very important because you're talking about tracing out a path that is the shortest distance between 2 points, but it's not necessarily a straight line. And because we're dealing with quantum consciousness, it's not even a line at all. It's moving between adjacent states that can be approximated with a line, but it's not a true line.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't have to pass through the other colors to get to it can pass from any color to any color at an instant's notice.
Yeah, because your body is like a finite object, so it only has the capacity to engender a finite number of what I call microstates. So what I've got on the screen right now is what they use to determine the paths that airplanes will take. So they're calculating geodesics, but it's not going to be a straight line because we are on a approximately spherical surface. So the geodesic is basically answering the question of, given this surface, what's the shortest distance between 2 points?
Well, that's it. Listen, this is where it's going to get very interesting, because you take what you know with my model and you'll have geodesics of behavior. You'll say, okay, well, these are the influences. And this is, like I said, this is what's done all the time. It's just a way to map it out. So you take an example like, well, I need to organize 1.5 billion people. What's the best way to do that? Well, a really good way is to have a dictator and have him say what everyone does, and then have an army to make sure it happens. That's a really good way to make that happen. You can predict the slope of people who live in those conditions. You got cameras on them, and you've got military. If you want to evade entropy, a really good way is to have one guy in charge of making sure everybody does it, and everybody does what he says. That's a good way to do it. Oh, you want them to be happy too? Well, that's something else. So then you throw in all the different IX, all the different influences, and you'll have this geodesic slope. The Q slope will be affected by the IX.
Yeah, so
Right
if we
now-
wanted to talk about that idea within this context, we would say that statistically speaking, the
Right.
geodesic is, people will usually change their mind into the closest available highest entropy state. But they might change their mind to a different state. But if they are going to go to a state that's not the one that the model predicts as the minimum energy or maximum entropy state, there's going to be a reason for that.
Yes.
There has to be some personal will directed reason for someone to change their mind in a more extreme way than what the model would predict is the highest probability transition.
Yes. Yeah. You got it. Yeah. This is going to be an interesting trip with you. This is what I find fascinating, is that I have, like I said, I call myself, I'm just a little hobbit with a shiny ring, and I meet sorcerers like you that once this gets into your head, it'll be amazing what comes of this. I liken myself to Galileo, just trying to make out the planets, and then someone comes along with what's the one? A Hubble telescope. They'll tell you what the planets look like up close, and then you have a Voyager. So I've got an idea of how it works, and then you throw in these mathematical models that people are already familiar with, and just, oh, okay, we'll just apply it to this. Wow, okay, this is how it works. You see what I mean? So for you, I'm just giving you a new tool that your brain is just going to go produce amazing things with it. I'm confident of that.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, it looks like we're going on about 2 hours, so maybe it's a good time to wrap up. I've had a great time. It's always fun to see these ideas develop, because even in the short time we've talked, I feel like you're getting sharper. Do you agree?
Well, I think so. The more I explain it to someone who, see, now the past 2 years have always been battling, and I knew I would win every time because winning was adding to my data set. So every argument was only to benefit the data and made me understand better. But now with you get it. It's not a competition. You aren't trying to beat me down, which I didn't mind. It was just fun for me.
No, I'm game B all the way.
Yeah. So
like the only time I would beat someone down is if I thought that they were impeding on my ability to do game B. But you're not, because you're developing your own ideas. You're playing in a sandbox, and that, I mean, my ideology isn't so insecure that it can't handle new ideas, right? I think it's great. So yeah, game B all the way. It can be done. You just have to get more comfortable with debating and talking and being open to, like, I wouldn't say changing your ideas, but it's more like developing ideas. Because like, I don't know, for those of you who've watched Duvid and I, like, if you go back to the older episodes versus now, our communication's way better because we're both learning from each other, right?
Yeah. I feel like we're doing that. And I really appreciate it. And I think we're hitting The beauty of it, I think, is it takes what everybody knows and puts it into a uniform format. And I'm hitting people that not only know this, but they have a real practical model in their head, and all of a sudden it just clicks, and they go, "Oh wow, yep, son of a gun." Because from what I can tell, it doesn't matter what your ideology is, just map it out there. So there's no disagreement. There's no reason to fight about religion. There's no reason to fight about ideology. Just map it out. As long as your ideology is good, it'll line up. It is whatever you want it to. It's just a representation of reality. So whatever you think it is, well, here, put it on the map. It'll fit. If it's off the edges, well, that's something that you, for example, if someone dies, they're not in our reality anymore. And that allows for God. It allows for all sorts of any kind of mythology or explanation that you want. Well, they're just not visible. The effect is still there. It's just infrared or it's ultraviolet. It's there. It just has a different effect. You see what I mean? So anyway, yes, great talking, Jennifer. I appreciate it, and I hope this starts getting around because it's starting to click brains, and I'm seeing chain reactions. I love it.
Awesome. Yeah, I just sent you a meme that I've been working on that is sort of in line with your ideas with regards to changing one's mind, how that works out in my system. So what I'll do is make a post on it soon. I just wanted to send it to you, and hopefully we can work on something like maybe like a test of concept and do something with people associating a color with a song to see if there's any type of cross stimulus convergence that we can use to further, because basically we want to be able to defend the model, right? So if we have all this evidence and say, hey, look, it actually was predictive. It was actually showing a pattern. It wasn't just totally random. I don't care if you disagree with me, because it doesn't matter, because you're wrong.
Yeah, that's right. That's the end of those arguments. You can say I'm wrong, but well, look, here's a model of 6 months data, and here's a scatter plot, and here's the center of mass. You see what I mean? So you can argue with a color or an equation at this point. Which one? Because there's nothing else to talk about.
I love it. All right. Well, thanks so much, and I look forward to the next stream. We'll probably be live here soon because it seems like you're interested, so I'm always up for it. Thanks again for joining, and thanks to the audience for your contributions. Really appreciate it. We've got a show coming up. I believe it's on Saturday with another friend of the show and friend of yours who will be coming on to explain some ideas that he's had, so I'm really looking forward to that. So yeah, we can talk about that diagram, and I look forward to continuing the conversation. Thanks, everyone, and we'll talk to you again real soon. Bye-bye for now.
Yeah, maybe that's just so to say, a worthless opinion of...
It's so important that she can't be told, she won't be told that it's wrong. And
bringing it back to Church of Entropy and her attack dog, Gandalf the White.
Why don't you learn to shut up and fuck your goddamn logic?
They control the media, and the media is capable of making the sheeple believe in anything.
Yeah, I don't mind. I mean, we've had these streams, and I've been doing with Church of Entropy, and she's been bringing on new people, and like we did those streams on like stream etiquette. We walked through like the technology.
I have like very strongly negative opinions of the kind of Brundle clique.
Is she trying to garner herself cult prestige by associating herself with a retard?